All right, so I know I'm standing between you and lunch, so hopefully this will be on time. What I'm going to present is a framework for game theoretic analysis of censorship resistance. This is joint work with my co-authors who were at Waterloo, John Doucette, Hadi Husseini, and my supervisor at Waterloo, Ian Goldberg, and Stephen Murdoch. I think he is in somewhere here. Okay, so as you may recall from my earlier presentation, we had this sensor model which was centered around the concept of errors. There was collateral damage was being considered a lot. And we thought, okay, well, how does collateral damage and also information leakage, which is the information that the sensor wanted to block but got through, how do those, if we include that, how does the situation change? And we also wanted to see what happens in terms of the sensor's behavioral dynamics. Like, we always seem to look at the sensor as some kind of static entity who wants to do something. So we wanted to model that as well. And we also wanted to model or see what happens when there's the interaction between the sensor and the censorship resistance system. We saw that there was this like arms race, but what we want to look at here is an interaction between the usage of the censorship resistance system and the sensor and how they behave. So all of these things can be modeled as a strategic game, which I will give a very, very, very high level and simplistic view of it. There's more details in the paper, but in fact, I think there's a lot more depth to this. But the things you need to get away from, take away is, in order to understand what's the presentation, is that the two actors, the sensor and the censorship resistance system, are rational, meaning that what they try to do is, so they have a set of preferences over certain outcomes. They prefer some things to other things. And the players are going to seek to maximize their utility, the utility that they get from these outcomes. So utility can be, money, fame, or whatever that it is valuable. We're just going to call it utility. And what they're not going to do is harm the other actor if it also harms themselves. So this is the part where they're behaving as rational actors. Okay. The second thing is the concept of equilibriums. Because we have this interaction between the two parties, we want to see if the game that they're playing ever stabilizes. Is there a particular set of strategies for the two that if they play those strategies, there's no better thing that they can do, no other steps that they can take. So that's considered a equilibrium point. And this is considered an equilibrium point because any one party cannot take a unilateral deviation, like do another strategy, and produce a higher utility for them. If that's the case, then this was not what we were at, was not the equilibrium point, that other thing might be. So that's the other thing to take away, that once you find the equilibrium point, it means that it's stable, the game should, there's no other strategies that the players can do that will help them. Okay, so with that said, let's model a censorship game. We focus, because there's a huge, like we mentioned in the previous presentation, there's a huge broad area of things we could look at, the interactions of many different parts. What we did is we focused on the data channel. This is the channel which is being used by the censorship resistance system to transport the juicy content that this resistor wants to look at. And so on this channel, there's some non-circumvention traffic. This is the traffic that's just there. The data channel might be, something like a Skype channel, or it could be, email channel or anything of that nature. So this is stuff that's not censorship resistance related. And onto that channel, we're going to put the censorship resistant traffic. This is like the common thing that is happening is, from the talks we've just seen, is that that's what we try to do. We're going to put this there because we're hoping that the sensor is not going to block this channel because the loss of the non-circumvention traffic. Okay, so together, this is the entire total traffic on the network. And what the sensor can do, it's a simplistic sensor. We're not looking at a very complicated sensor that can do crazy DPI and stuff like that. We looked at a very simplistic sensor. All they can do is allow the channel to go through or block it, because we're assuming that our censorship resistance system is so good that the sensor is unable to tell non-circumvention traffic from the censorship resistance traffic. Okay. The censorship, the yellow part, the CDP, it's a fraction of the non-circumvention traffic. It's just how much traffic is being sent as a relation to the non-circumvention traffic. Okay. Now, in the paper, we looked at increasingly more complex settings. I'm going to present the second setting. You should definitely read the paper for the more complex part where we introduce an apparatus for the sensor as well to show what happens, but the general results don't change there. So I'm going to present this one. So here, the game is that we're going to play this, the sensor and the circumventor are going to play a number of rounds, but neither of them know when the game is going to end, okay? And so that's what I mean by the indefinite horizon, okay? And here what we find is the equilibrium strategy is that the sensor should never violate this particular fraction of traffic to send as a relation, as a proportion of the total non-circumvention traffic, and the sensor will always play allow. So as long as the circumventor doesn't violate this threshold, the channel will be open and you can get that much censorship resistance traffic out at least. The intuition behind this is that at any given round, the circumventor always gains more utility in any given round, the circumventor thinks, maybe I should deviate, I should send more than this threshold. But if I wait to the next round, I get this amount that I can get through now, this fraction here, and that extra next round. But since I don't know when the game ends, it's every single round, it's always better for me to make one more round. And in that way, the circumventor, it's never a good idea for them to deviate, and then hence, it's not a good idea for the sensor to need to block. And since this is an equilibrium point, both of them will play this, this strategy, and there's no deviation from here. We also added a little part about this equilibrium problem is still stable even if the blocking is not permanent. So up here in the first two bullet points, what we've said is if you ever deviate, the sensor will block this data channel forever. In this other part where it's not permanent, it's like maybe the sensor will block you for a duration of time as punishment. Even there, the equilibrium still plays out. What this means is there's no point deviating even if the blocking is not permanent. The sensor type, which just means what are their preferences, this fraction, whatever it happens to be, it only affects the fraction of CTP, not the existence of the equilibrium point. Okay? All right. So this was a more like on paper kind of thing. It's like, do these equilibrium points exist? What are they? And characterize them. Now we talk about, okay, let's try to move to the real world, or as much as we can from this simple model that we have. And let's look at the multiple channels. Let's try to apply this to multiple channels. We know what we can do with single channels. So the real world motivation could be that, I don't know, how many people here have heard of Tor? Pluggable transports, maybe? Okay, good. So, there's many pluggable transports. There's also systems like Stegosaurus. Anyone heard of Stegosaurus? It tries to send traffic over multiple formats, okay? So there is some precedent that want to use multiple channels. What we'd like to, another motivation could be that we would like to move more traffic than just that fraction that's available on that one data channel. We add more channels, and hence we are getting more traffic out. And also, since we already have these protocols or transports available, how best to use them? We'd like to answer, is it the case that we should use them one at a time or all of them together? So that's what we'd like to look at. And what we found is that the equilibrium point is to treat each data channel or transport as individually, only send as much traffic as that fraction we talked about, and just do that for every single transport. However much non-circumvention traffic is there on that channel, just send that proportion of CTP so that the sensor will not block because you're not violating the thresholds. Now, of course, but maybe you've distributed as much of the CTP as you can, but you still have surplus left over. So the strategic thing to do is just to dump it on the smallest protocol. That way you lose the least amount of CTP because the sensor is going to block that one. So there, he blocks it, right? So that's cool. That's dumping. Now, we said, oh, what if we just throttle the traffic that's being produced by the censorship resistance, so we just ignore the surplus traffic, right? So we can just model this as another protocol at the end that has no circumvention, non-circumvention traffic on it. It costs the sensor nothing to block it. It's just modeling it. I mean, we could have many other ways which we could do, like just ignore it at the client, or tell clients don't send more than this much traffic. That's just how it might be realized. So at least here you avoid losing the smallest protocol, and then hence you end up with higher circumventor utility and also sensor utility. Okay, great, so this all sounds great, but there's a problem. If your dumping or throttling mechanism can be gamed, it's susceptible to an attack. Okay, so throttling is susceptible and dumping is similarly susceptible. So this is the flooding attack. What happens is, shoot, you're only supposed to see the first yellow thing here. That's the channel. You have, I'm only going to look at the circumvention traffic now. I'm ignoring the non-circumvention traffic. The adversary, the sensor, starts pumping, starts using your CRS and starts sending fake traffic, right? They don't care if it gets through or not. It's just junk, right? So they start sending it. So that red stuff is just the fake traffic, right? So together, the CTP has now become this. The system thinks, oh no, I need to get rid of this much surplus. But it's going to be indiscriminate which of these, because the censorship resist system can't tell, just like the sensor can't tell non-circumvention traffic from CRS, the censorship resist system can't tell from real circumvention traffic from like the one that sensor is sending. So it's indiscriminately going to just try to do it so that both proportions get decreased. And what happens is, so on the channel, you end up with some amount of fake traffic and real traffic, but it's less than what was going out before. And the throttled or dumped protocol is getting the evicted traffic. So in this way, the sensor can evict real censorship resistance traffic off of protocols that are actually functioning or carrying traffic onto either being throttled or dumped. And this, for the sensor, it doesn't cost anything extra. Like if the cost of attack is 0 for the sensor, then he can drive this down to there being no censorship resistance or almost no censorship resistance traffic on the channel. Okay, well, that's kind of bad. So yeah, this is going to be blocked or throttled or what have you. So there's an alternative. It looks very similar to the picture I had here. You'll note that it's monotonically decreasing, right? So what we do is we say, okay, we have this, but anytime we need to send any surplus, we will never allow more than any smaller protocol or smaller protocol with less non-circumvention traffic on it to carry more CTP on it. We will shift it in this direction. So the thing that the sensor was leveraging before was the fact that you will never move off of this small protocol. You'll just keep dumping the surplus there, so there's no extra added cost. We're getting rid of that, and we're saying, no, we will, it's anyone's, like, it will actually start sending too much traffic over larger protocols, and hence at least drive up the cost of the attack. So the surplus traffic gets spread over every potential protocol, and it drives up the cost. I just said that. Okay, so we looked at the cost effectiveness, meaning the sensor, what the gain is. They're going to start sending traffic. The losses they take from the collateral damage of having to block a protocol with non-circumvention traffic on it, with the gain of how much they were able to evict onto this thing. Okay, so in this case, even when the cost of attack is 0 for the sensor, it is still self-limiting. In the paper, we discuss like what are the feature or the variables in terms of how quickly things can get limited. It has to do with the ratio between the protocols and how much non-circumvention traffic is there. But at the end, what we find is that it's always better than throttling in the presence of this kind of attack. So yeah, so that's what I wanted to say there. Of course, this doesn't mean this is the best, right? This is an alternative that is better than throttling or dumping. And if you can protect your dumping and throttling mechanism from being gamed, then obviously they would be better because you'd get more traffic out, right? Okay, so limitations in future work. Like I said, this is a very simple sensor model. Like it can only look at traffic and block it or allow it. It can differentiate and stuff like that. Another thing is that you require perfect information. Both parties must know exactly what your preferences are and how much you gain and lose and all that stuff. So there's that. Also, this kind of, the first two kind of imply the second one was like you need to probe the sensor type. Like you want to know who is it that you're dealing with. You want to know what that value of F should be. And there might be ways where you can probe this to infer, like first you just try, just send some traffic, see what happens. If he doesn't block it, maybe there's more room, you send more traffic. But this is kind of difficult because the sensor could start gaming your probing and be like, oh, he's probing right now. I should really have, you know, tell them that I have much less tolerance for what I really want to do. So this is kind of an open problem still. So key takeaways. So we provided a game theoretic analysis of a simple censorship game. We looked at various traffic allocation strategies for single and multi-channel networks, as well as provide some flood attack mitigation. All right, great. So that was it. Thank you, everyone.